Hey there. It's been a minute, huh? It's late. I've just juiced. This mess behind me is the bedding from Hazel's sleepover last night. I haven't put it away yet. And I'm not going to. I juiced because I ran out of juice. Didn't have time to make any yesterday or today. And I did not want to go another day without making it because I have another day where I'm going to be busy tomorrow. And I was like, well, I can either get up early and make it, or I can not toss and turn in bed for these few hours and instead make some juice. So here we are. And in making the juice, which is a very green batch, it's alright, we're making up for lost time, right? I was having these thoughts. So just to catch you up, one of the things I've been doing in my time apart from this posting thing that I do is working through some of the emotion that has to do with having grown up in a household where my needs weren't actually met, and how that correlates to my level of self-care. For instance, not prioritizing making the juice for 2 days, right? It was like I found myself doing things for other people, you know? But the thing was, it was before that it was happening, because I made these commitments over the last couple days that I was fulfilling the last couple days. I made the commitments beforehand. And beforehand, the version of me that should have prioritized making juice over committing to other people wasn't present. And I was noticing it in the last couple days when I found myself without juice and wondering, why didn't I prioritize making my juice? Because I know that's something I really need and want in my life. And my body really hates it when I don't do it. So why didn't I make that like in my schedule? And why did I put myself in a position where I overcommitted to other things, leaving myself without the time or energy to do it? So it made me start looking at things like that. And I knew it was tied directly to that same energy of being a child that grew up in a home where I didn't prioritize my own self-care, that prioritizing doing for others and making sure I was gaining their attention or love in the moment took precedence over everything. And so, like I had said before, I'd lost myself, in childhood, and I may not have said this part, but I've been working to get to know myself over these years of doing this healing work, this self-healing. So the other thing that had happened was I did a barter session with somebody where it was kind of like we were tying up loose ends, where I needed to do a reading for her and she needed to do a follow-up for me. And her specialty is human design. And I was doing astrology for her. And which I know I don't offer on my website. If you've ever looked, I'd have some stuff about astrology there, but it's more like self-serve stuff. The only place that I'm offering astrology readings right now is on the app called Simbi. And you can look me up there if you're interested in that. I offer just one a month, just because that feels appropriate to do, and you can check it out if it's interesting to you. But anyway, so we were finishing up our barter, and we end up having our session. This was, I don't know, last week or so now. And she's an expert in human design, so she had a little bit of feedback for me about some questions I had. And most of it was reassurance, but what she did say, and it's something that I had read about before in my chart, but really hadn't paid too much attention to, was that she said, one of my channels really focused in on melancholy, and that melancholy was actually something that I would, experience. And I thought it was interesting when she said it, because I wouldn't generally say that I am melancholic. But my oracle, you guys know my oracle if you've been following along. I guess it needs a new box. But my oracle has Melancholia, which is an asteroid name, but it's representative of melancholy. It comes out a lot when I do readings for myself. Spirit is often trying to get my attention on melancholy. So she said, there is a gift for you in your melancholy. And when she said it, like, I got a download right then, and it was like a whole another timeline opened up for me. Like, energetically, I felt this. And I was just like, oh. And she was saying, yeah, you don't have to just, like, assume something's wrong and move through it. There's actually a benefit of being in it. And I was just like, oh, interesting, because, like, yeah, you know, I move through energy so quickly that I just often just, like, alchemize. I just alchemize. And it happens really naturally. I don't have to do anything. It's that process, that formula that I've shared with you guys a million times now. Acknowledge, validate, accept, and be present with. Once I do that, it just moves, and it's like something new. And but as you know, that involves paying attention to whatever's happening, and then validating it involves like a little bit of analysis. And so what she was suggesting was just like being with my melancholy, and not trying to, you know, not alchemizing it, not zero pointing it out. And because when she said it, I knew it was a pertinent thing for me. I could feel energetically that it was going to open up something for me, and that I needed to do it. I took notice. Okay, so you know what else she said is that I have the channel of shock, and that I have the left hand angle of uncertainty, which means I am meant to guide people through uncertainty. But it's interesting because I have that channel of shock. Often I create the uncertainty with something shocking, something that shocks the system, or shatters, or gives a tower moment, or opens a realization and things like that. So it's like just a conversation with me can sometimes put somebody in uncertainty, and then that's when I can guide them. And what I realized that is about is like, it's kind of like untying the knot of the energy. Because that's what basically we're doing. When I'm reading subtle energy, I always know what I'm doing is untangling knots. And sometimes you've heard me say, like, sometimes it's a Jenga tower. Like, sometimes you're going to move one thing and then so if you can imagine if a Jenga tower was tied together with ropes, when it falls, the knots are kind of like, but you still can untangle them. Okay, so she had some great insights for me about me. And as I moved through that, in the next couple days after that, I was kind of just thinking, I kind of lost that notion of like how I can grab onto melancholy, because I didn't have any to grab onto, and I was just like, oh. And then I came upon this, place where I knew I had to process this child version of me who wasn't prioritizing her own self-care. And here is where I got to access some melancholy. Because that was a long-standing sadness that occurred that I wasn't really able to process as a child. So it just kind of sat in my energy body. So what I was doing is digging it up through this time where I've just kind of been being with myself, and yes, staying consistent with my responsibilities and all that, but also just really taking all the moments I can to be with myself and be with my melancholy, which was, I gotta admit, it's been very, very hard to grab onto it or to be with it, or because I feel like I'm not melancholic, but I did get to grab it a few times, and so I feel like I was just kind of like cultivating the space for it to come up within me and like be here more. Okay. So when I did finally do that, what happened was I kind of started feeling I feel like there's not a good word for me to use here. Because if I say hopeless, I think it gives the wrong impression, because I wasn't hopeless, but I was more apathetic maybe. Um, I wasn't worried, I wasn't in anxiety, I wasn't in depression. I was just kind of in like, yeah, kind of sick of this. I'm kind of sick of, like, what's coming up? Because I was then, activated in that child version of myself who no one was paying attention to and who didn't feel like she was getting the care she wanted, right? So I'm looking at the world through the lens of that. And I started remembering all the times Spirit had fed me information that did not turn out to be true. Now, I do walk in faith, and I do trust Spirit. But there's definitely that child part of me that would slip into like, well, I only trust Spirit because who else am I going to trust? And you can notice how that would be something that child would have said about their parents who weren't paying attention, right? If I'm a child and my parents can't pay attention to me because they're in their own traumatized states, yeah, I have to depend on them, but like, it's because I have to. Like, who else would I depend on? So it's kind of like I started looking at God and my guides that way. It was kind of like a little bit cynical in that it was like, yeah, I trust them, but like, that's because I have to. And yeah, like, what about the times that they haven't come through with what they told me? And I think, there haven't been a lot of them, but there've been like, there's like a key one that really bothered me over the years that I never got closure on. Like, I can feel tears coming to the back of my eyes when I even mention it here. So, just so you know, I haven't tried to move through my melancholy. I'm letting it be with me, and this is me amidst that. But I'm kind of just like wanting to document and wanting to express where this is going for me, and the realization that I just had while I was juicing this delicious green juice, which my body will thank me for. So, I hadn't touched my more Oracle bucket in days, but tonight, I've already been in bed and then gotten back out of bed to do my juicing and stuff. But before I got out of bed, I started pulling tickets to just see, like, hey, give me a heads up where we're at, and, if there's anything you want me to be paying attention to, that would be in the highest good. And the topic of marriage came out of the bucket. And it has before, like last time I went to the bucket days ago, marriage, that topic came out. And marriage has been coming out a little bit here and there in recent months and years. But the thing about that was, I never could make sense of whatever message was trying to be shown to me. But today, I did. Today I did, but I didn't know why I was getting that message necessarily until afterwards, and I'll explain. So the message that came out of the bucket through me asking questions like, why is this here? And then like, it was that tedious of the process, like asking the bucket the questions that I needed to ask in order to get a fuller picture of what the message was. And basically it was saying like, hey, yes, you were meant to be married with somebody who didn't, I want to say choose you, who there's a parting of ways with, and there was maybe some interference that distracted them or tantalized them or whatever, and they didn't come towards you, right? For a relationship. And now this relationship with this particular person, I had to pull like, well, who is this? Like, why? Like, I don't know. I was kind of annoyed at first. Like, I was like, who cares? Like, why are you telling me about this? Like, who is this person? And if they didn't come towards me, then why do I care? Why are you even telling me this? And it said that it was a renegotiated contract, and that basically it was an old friend, someone who I knew more than 10 years ago, It did narrow down who exactly it is. And then I thought, well, why are you bringing up this person to me? Because this person has a girlfriend. In fact, I know this person considers this girlfriend like their wife. So, like, there would be no reason for me to look at this person in this way, right? And so I was kind of just like, you know, well, if you want me to look at like relationships and stuff and marriage and stuff, like, well, well, who do you have in mind for me? I was thinking, like let's talk about that. Forget this other person. Like, thanks for letting me know. For whatever reason, I don't know. But then I realized why. So one of the very first times that I felt let down by Spirit was a major thing. And in 2017, I was told by Spirit, my guidance, that I was moving towards marriage. Because that's really what I wanted, especially at that time. And I felt a little bit like I was being led, like with like a little carrot being dangled in front of me on my spiritual path, But whatever, that was the way that I advanced at that time, because that's what motivated me, is being able to be in a relationship. So I was told at that time that I was working towards a marriage. And so here we are, all these years later, and, there's no marriage. And I always kind of didn't know. I never got closure from Spirit. Whenever I asked, I wouldn't get clear answers. Or it would be confusing for me to understand whatever answers were being given, because maybe I was clouded and biased and scared and all that stuff. But here, in this ask, I was willing to be with my melancholy. I was willing to be with the feelings of it. Because say they had taken the time to let me have the understanding earlier on, and I understood it without being willing to sit with the feelings of it. Right now, it was like, I'm willing to be with the difficult, uncomfortable feelings, so, okay, I can understand this now, because now I can process what it feels like. So then I did. I moved into that place where I was like, oh, okay. You're telling me that marriage that you had promised me was this person, and that didn't happen. And that holding onto the confusion of it for me was putting a wedge between me and Spirit in a way, because I was just holding it to Spirit, like, well, there was that time that you didn't come through and you told me that. Why did you tell me that? And that, and like very childlike, right? Because that was the child version of me who was trying to make sense of people not following through on making sure my needs are met, And so then I kind of stepped into this energy of like, okay, well, let me look at this person for a second. And I thought, well, I know this person has struggled with a lot of childhood wounding. And so I know a relationship with them wouldn't have been without healing work to do, right? For both of us, because that was a while ago. And I still hadn't done a lot of my healing work. So I looked at them and I was like, well, this person suffers from a lot of childhood wounding, and whatever mindset they were in, even if we had a soul plan to come together in this lifetime, when you're a human and you're like in the densities and all these pains and these veils, it's kind of difficult to follow a soul plan or even to give a shit about it when you're in suffering. So I just kind of went like, okay, yeah, I need to forgive this person. Like, this is not something that I would want to hold on to as like a judgment or a grudge or a disappointment even. It was like I just saw this person as the child version of them, and it was just like, oh yeah, of course I forgive you, because I would never want to put burdens on somebody who was already suffering, right? Or anyone, and for that matter, right? So and then from that moment I was like, oh, I also need to forgive me, the child version of me, who is holding on to all these things, the grudges against God, the grudges against my parents for not, being there and stuff like that. Because the grudge is sort of like a placeholder for the pain. And even though it wasn't like an active grudge that I was in my mind living out, it was just like stuff to the background, right? So there was this moment where I just forgave myself too, the child version of me who acted the way she did, about just needing a relationship, about being mad at God for not providing, for expecting it to go one way, or even feeling entitled that I would have a relationship, all that kind of stuff. And while I was at it, I took another extra breath and just forgave every single person in my life and in the world for living out the traumas and the suffering of their own child versions, because I just saw everyone as a child in that moment and just was exhaled this just release of holding anyone to anything, which is interesting because I did end up making my candles in this time where I've been taken to myself, and this one that I made is the one I've been burning. It says release, 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 right? So I just released a bunch of burden right there, and that's basically what I'm doing here, is just working through some stuff that's got to be let go of. So then I was juicing, and then I just started to think so another thing that's come out in my bucket a lot is missed opportunity. And I also didn't know what that meant either. And I was thinking about, while I was juicing, I was thinking, well, I did, I said, well, any respect, I thought, well, okay, so I talked to this person recently, this particular person, fairly recently. And I was just thinking, well, this person has a girlfriend, so they wouldn't have expected me to let them know about any sort of retraction or, potential, right? Because any respectable person wouldn't get themselves involved in someone who had a relationship already, right? And that was a cool thought for me, not because that's an epiphany or anything, but because right in that moment, I flipped it around, as my mind often does, and I thought about when I was breaking up with my last boyfriend and how I started to be around a bunch of new men, and I did find some of them attractive and was interested in a couple or few of them even, but that none seemed to reciprocate. Even if they flirted a little, they didn't kind of pursue or advance in any way that was meaningful. And I thought in that moment, oh, I think it's because I floundered. I think it's because when I broke away from the ex, I got back with him. We broke up again. I got back with him. Towards the end, it was a bit on and off again. So any man that saw me when initially, and I'm single, and then I go back with the ex, now all of a sudden, I've shown myself to be someone who doesn't respect themselves or is definitely not available. And any self-respecting man would not have come towards me, because who would involve themselves in that? Here I am not available because I'm obviously looking like I'm still going back to the ex. Funny thing, the biggest reason why I kept going back to him was because I thought God meant that I was supposed to marry him. And I didn't want to be with someone who treated me the way he did. But because I thought God wanted me to, I kept trying. So isn't that fucked up? It was a misunderstanding, right? Because through my lens of wanting to be fairy tale happily ever after with one man, I thought it's got to be him. And, to me, he was, I've been with, some great guys, but to me, that guy, the last one, was kind of this upgraded version as far as having his shit together, not emotionally, not so much emotionally, but at least he didn't he kept his shit together. I will definitely give him that. So to me, that was, it was like, yeah, like I want someone who keeps their shit together, and anyone who's just stifled emotionally has potential to get out of that, right? And that's another thing I was thinking about. So let me make sure I've tied up this thought about, oh yeah, so any self-respecting man, and then there was another side thought I was going to go back to, but now I'm branched off again. Hold on. All right, I'll just go in the branch. So I was listening to Healthy Gamer GG, which is a YouTube channel, a psychiatrist, and he was talking about the psychology of a Karen. And I was just listening along, and now I've lost my train of thought, damn it. But I will say this, Healthy Gamer GG is a cool channel to check into if you're interested in this kind of stuff, because he recently did a video on how red flags lead to love. Check it out. Good stuff. Good stuff. Because he talks about how working through hard stuff together, when both people prove that they are able to work through hard stuff together, that is an indication of a healthy relationship. And it doesn't mean that it'll always be hard, right? So that was one of the issues that I had when I was just going into relationships with this rose-colored glasses, thinking God was leading me to the one, and that was the one. And I forgot to realize, like, oh, is the other person putting in the effort too? And instead I would just take up the slack and put in all the effort, So basically what I was back when I was juicing, and the thoughts I was having about how any respectable man wouldn't have come towards me, the stream just keeps going. Damn it. Oh, I was thinking, oh, that's the missed opportunities. That was the missed opportunities. I actually set myself up for missed opportunities because I was confused about the messages I was getting from Spirit. Because I didn't have enough wisdom to understand those messages. And that's just what it is, right? Like, I literally had to fumble through even my divine guidance because it was seen through my own biases. And all I can say is, like, I don't know. Like, that's just what it is. Like, I couldn't have understood it any clearer or better or more sooner than I did, because I did my best. I wasn't ignoring it most of the time. I was just too frustrated on the topic from trying so many times to understand what they were trying to say. But now I understand. They were saying, like, you're holding out for a marriage that we talked to you about. You're holding it against us that it didn't come this way. But meanwhile, you are literally missing opportunities because you're still playing on that old timeline, when that old timeline is irrelevant now. Because you're not without opportunity. There are other options, and you are missing them all while you still stay trying to figure that old stuff out. So that was the gift in my melancholy. And so it also ties to my melancholy in that view of being a child in a household where my selfhood and my personhood didn't really matter, and taking care of myself didn't really matter. And it's because I wouldn't have been operating that way in life, which was trying to do the right thing that God or Spirit or guidance told me to do, without regard for how I was being affected or what I wanted or anything like that, Like, it was like I was doing the same thing in my life as an adult, but guidance was my parent. And I was treating guidance like it was my parent. And guidance was kind of saying, like, you are an adult now. And you do have a say. And the child part of me was kind of like, no, don't give me options. Just tell me the right thing that's going to get me the love. Just tell me the right thing. Just tell me what to do, because I'll do it. I will do it. Just tell me what is that I need to do to get the love. So when I was when I was posed with like missed opportunities and you have options coming out of my bucket, to me that was just like, did I do something wrong? Like what have I done wrong? And like, okay, options, well, I don't see any. Because I thought you're supposed to tell me what to do, because that's that child version of me. And that's interesting, right? Because like there is nourishment in this bucket that comes out a lot too, right? So my oracle did even say like, hey, yeah, okay, if you need us to tell you, then yeah, nourish yourself. And that's what would alert me to nourish myself. It was not my love of self, which is the problem, right? Which was a problem, because then I start projecting onto other people that they're not living up to what God wanted for them to do, and they would have been in this role, and and it's like, no, none of that is actually true. You're actually just like putting it in somebody else's hands. You're like projecting onto them the pain that you need to feel, which was that you didn't get what you wanted. Like I wanted a marriage and I didn't get that. And I wanted my parents to pay attention and make me the star of the show. I didn't get that. There's some disappointment to process there. There's pain. There's, but it is possible to process it, right? And that's a kind of a beautiful thing that I've seen too, as I've been willing to sit with the feelings of that child version of me, because that was like a prolonged thing. My whole life went like that, where I didn't have that kind of attentiveness and care that I wanted. I just have been able to like show that child version of me that, look, this version of me that is like, we're actually pretty cool, and aren't we lucky? Aren't we lucky that it's me that gets to take care of us? Like I genuinely feel that. I genuinely feel like this child version of me who is so hurt and not wanting to prioritize taking care of herself is learning that we are so lucky that we're the ones that get to take care of ourselves. Yeah. So that's been very interesting and cool. And yeah, there really was a gift for me in my melancholy. And it was some realizations of things that were really holding me back, because I was looking through the lens of this hurt child still all this time. And when I would get frustrated and be confused, I would just surrender it, because that's what you got to do when you're frustrated and confused. And maybe I would have worked through it sooner if I had somebody to like throw that stuff against, right? And like have them feed it back to me from. But like there was no one ever that I could tell the whole story to, or there was something else in front of me at that time. And like, this is just the time that it came up. And so I'm going to have to say that this is just the time it was meant to be processed through. Because, yeah, there's that version of me that wants to say, like, couldn't we have got the root of this a long fucking time ago? But no, I guess we couldn't have. We could not have. This is it. This is what we do at this age. We rescue that version of ourselves that didn't know that it was totally appropriate and right to prioritize her own self-care. There have been other times in my life where I prioritized my own self-care, but it was at a time when I was literally isolated. I lived in a house in a very rural area, and I had no transportation. And I didn't even have a way to get food, so I ended up losing a lot of weight. I really got in touch with God during that time. I got very healthy. And then I just started eating vegetables and drinking lots of water. I never drank anything else. Cut out sugar, gluten, meat, eggs. Just totally went this whole version. But I gotta say that I did it not because I prioritized my own self-care. I did it out of survival, to be honest, And then also because I thought that was the right thing to do, is to, eat that way for for taking care of myself. But it wasn't because the inner part of me said, let's take care of myself. It was because I learned that, oh, you're supposed to take care of yourself. And that's why it wasn't sustainable when I start living my life and, interacting with other people and fitting them into my life, and I forget to prioritize, making my juice. So yeah, that's where I'm at. Feel slightly vulnerable, but also like, fuck it. It's just true. All right. See you soon.